Picture this. It's 146 BC. A city that once rivaled Rome itself is burning. The flames aren't just consuming buildings, they're erasing nearly 7 centuries of history. Roman soldiers are methodically destroying every structure, every temple, every home. And when the fires finally die down, they do something almost unthinkable. They plow salt into the earth itself, cursing the ground so nothing will ever grow there again. This is the final chapter of Carthage. But the story of how we got here? That's what most people don't know. Before we dive in, I want you to think about something. What does it take to make an entire civilization disappear? Not just lose a war, but to be so thoroughly destroyed that most of what we know about them comes from their enemies. Keep that question in mind as we uncover this story together. Let's rewind about 800 years before that catastrophic ending. Around 814 BC, according to legend, a Phoenician princess named Dido arrives on the North African coast. She's fleeing her homeland of Tyre, where her brother murdered her husband to seize power. With nothing but a small group of followers and her wit, she approaches the local Berber king with a simple request. She wants to buy land. But here's where it gets interesting. She asks only for as much land as can be covered by an ox hide. The king laughs and agrees. What harm could such a tiny plot do? But Dido isn't just a refugee princess. She's brilliant. She takes that ox hide, cuts it into the thinnest possible strips, and uses them to mark out a massive area on a hill overlooking the Mediterranean. The locals are stunned. The king has to honor his word, and on that hill, Dido founds Carthage, which in Phoenician means new city. Now, you might be wondering, is this story true? Probably not entirely. But here's what matters. The Carthaginians themselves believed it, and they built their identity around the cleverness, the cunning, the sheer audacity of that founding myth. That spirit of resourcefulness would define them for centuries. Within just a few generations, Carthage becomes something extraordinary. While other cities focus on conquering territory, Carthage builds something different, a commercial empire. They establish trade networks that stretch from the Atlantic coast of Africa all the way to the tin mines of Britain. They're trading in precious metals, ivory, exotic animals, textiles, and most importantly, purple dye, the Phoenician specialty that's worth more than gold. Their ships are everywhere. Carthaginian merchants are the middlemen of the ancient Mediterranean, and they're getting wealthy beyond imagination. By 300 BC, Carthage is possibly the richest city in the world. The city itself is home to over 400,000 people, absolutely massive for the ancient world. They have a sophisticated harbor system with both commercial and military docks. They've got 6-story apartment buildings, automated street cleaning, a senate, elected officials, and a constitution that actually limits the power of their leaders. But here's something fascinating that most people don't realize. The Carthaginians are secretive, almost paranoid about their trade routes. If a Carthaginian captain sees a foreign ship following him to discover a secret trading location, he'll deliberately crash his own ship, destroying it and the foreign vessel to protect Carthage's commercial secrets. The government will even reimburse him for his ship. That's the level of commitment we're talking about. They also have something unusual for the ancient world. They rely heavily on mercenaries. Unlike Rome, which builds its power on citizen soldiers who fight for patriotic duty, Carthage hires professional warriors from across the Mediterranean and Africa. They've got Numidian cavalry from North Africa, considered the best horsemen in the world. Spanish infantry, Balearic slingers, who can kill a man at 400 meters. Greek hoplites. This gives them flexibility and specialized skills, but it will become a weakness later. Remember that detail. For a while, Rome and Carthage actually get along. They even sign treaties dividing up spheres of influence. Rome controls Italy,
Carthage dominates the Western Mediterranean and North Africa. Everybody's happy, right? Wrong. The breaking point comes in 264 BC, and it starts with something small, a dispute over Sicily. Some mercenaries seize the city of Messana, and both Rome and Carthage get drawn into the conflict. What begins as a minor intervention explodes into the First Punic War, and it lasts 23 years. Here's where it gets wild. Rome isn't a naval power. They're land warriors. Carthage owns the seas. In the opening naval battle, the Romans get absolutely destroyed. So what do the Romans do? They capture a wrecked Carthaginian warship, reverse engineer it, and build an entire fleet by copying the design. In just 60 days. Can you imagine the audacity? But they don't stop there. Roman engineers realize they can't outsail the Carthaginians, so they invent the corvus, a boarding bridge with a spike that they can drop onto enemy ships, turning naval battles into land battles. It's crude, it makes their ships unstable, but it works. The Romans win several major naval engagements, and Carthage, for all its maritime expertise, starts losing control of the seas. The war drags on. Both sides are exhausted. Tens of thousands are dead. Finally, in 241 BC, Rome wins a decisive naval victory, and Carthage sues for peace. The terms are brutal. Carthage has to abandon Sicily, pay a massive indemnity, and promise not to wage war without Rome's permission. This is where we need to talk about Hamilcar Barca. He's a Carthaginian general who fought brilliantly in Sicily, but was undermined by his own government's lack of support. When he returns home, he's furious, not at Rome, but at Carthage's weak leadership. He has a young son, maybe 9 years old, named Hannibal. According to legend, Hamilcar makes his son swear an oath on a sacred altar, eternal hatred of Rome. Now pause for a second. Think about that. A father so consumed by the humiliation of defeat that he binds his young son to a lifelong vendetta. That oath will shape the next chapter of this story in ways nobody could predict. Hamilcar takes his family to Spain, where Carthage still has interests, and spends years building a new power base. He's essentially creating a private army, expanding Carthaginian territory, and accumulating wealth through Spanish silver mines. When he dies, his son-in-law takes over. And when the son-in-law is assassinated, guess who becomes the general at the age of 26? Hannibal Barca. Hannibal is not like other generals. He's charismatic, strategically brilliant, and absolutely committed to his father's oath. In 218 BC, he does something that even today seems insane. He decides to invade Italy by marching overland from Spain, crossing the Pyrenees, traversing the treacherous Alps, and bringing war directly to Rome's doorstep. Let me emphasize how crazy this is. He's got an army of about 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and, here's the part everyone knows, 37 war elephants. He's marching through hostile territory, over mountain passes that are already snowy, dealing with avalanches, ambushes by local tribes, and freezing temperatures. By the time he reaches Italy, he's lost nearly half his men and most of his elephants. But he makes it. And here's where Hannibal shows his genius. He doesn't attack Rome directly. Instead, he starts defeating Roman armies in the field, trying to break Rome's alliances with the Italian cities. At the Battle of Trebia, he uses the cold winter river to weaken Roman soldiers before the main engagement. At Lake Trasimene, he sets up a perfect ambush, trapping an entire Roman army against the lake and slaughtering 15,000 men in a few hours. But his masterpiece, that comes in 216 BC at a place called Cannae. The Romans assemble their largest army ever, maybe 80,000 men, determined to crush Hannibal once and for all. Hannibal has less than half that number, and yet, through brilliant tactics, he pulls off what military historians still study today as the perfect battle.
He deliberately weakens his center, lets the Romans push forward thinking they're winning, and then his cavalry sweeps around and encircles them completely. By the end of the day, somewhere between 50 and 70,000 Romans are dead. It's the worst military disaster in Roman history. Rome is in panic. Some allies do defect to Hannibal. It looks like Carthage might actually win. But here's the thing. Hannibal can win battles, but he can't win the war.